Good afternoon and welcome to the May 22nd edition of Office Hours. My name is Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy. I'm your host for today. Before we get into the questions that have come from our community, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness, which was founded in July 2021 with a vision for all college and career school students. And that was that they would be able to achieve these 6 pillars of collegiate financial wellness. Those are being creditworthy, ready, resilient, empowered, successful, and thriving. So if that sounds like a mission you'd like to support, please do visit us online at mccfw.org. And as for today's program, Office Hours is our free semi-monthly virtual student debt clinic where we take questions from student loan borrowers and try to give the best advice possible. But if you've been paying any attention to this space, you know that there's been a lot going on in the world of student loans. There are updates that come out, and we have to make sure that we stay on top of those. But just have to issue a quick disclaimer that Office Hours is presented for informational purposes only. The information that's included in today's broadcast does not constitute personal, legal, or financial advice. We do our best to keep you up to date, but just make sure that before you make any major decisions like consolidation or anything like that, that you have taken account of your personal situation, that's your household, your loans, as well as the information that we provided before you make those major choices. All right, so let's get into today. Quick updates. One thing I noticed, the date up in the corner is wrong. It says May 8th. This is actually May 22nd. So this is live. But quick note, PSLF is still ongoing. We have been getting a lot of questions about public service loan forgiveness and people wanting to know if public service loan forgiveness still exists because they've heard about the pause. But PSLF is still around. It's important to remember that even though there is a pause in the processing of applications, public service loan forgiveness is not going away. So if you submitted a PSLF application and you haven't heard anything, do not worry. The Department of Education has implemented a pause for at least the months of May and June, where you can submit new applications, but those applications will not be reviewed until the pause is over. And because of that pause, some people were thinking that the actual program itself was ending, but that's not true. So if you're a public servant, please do not worry about PSLF going away. It's just a processing pause because the Department of Education is transitioning to a new platform. So I know many of you were used to dealing with Fed Loan years ago, Mohela over the past couple of years. Now there's another shift. So it's going to look like you're dealing with the Department of Education when you're looking at your PSLF qualifying payment counts. So while that transition is taking place during the months of May and June, you're not going to see updated payment counts if you submit new PSLF applications. It doesn't mean anything is wrong. It just means that they're working through that transition, and you should hopefully expect an update to see more accurate payment count figures by the time July comes. So PSLF is not over, just on a processing pause. The second thing that I wanted to share with you is about another cancellation benefit, and that is through income-driven repayment and that one-time adjustment called the IDR adjustment. I know that over the past several months, I have said, make sure you take action by April 30th. April 30th is the deadline, and April 30th was the deadline. That deadline came and went, and on the last edition of Office Hours, which was May 8th, I said, April 30th has come and gone. That was the deadline. But late last week, we heard from the Department of Education that the deadline has been extended again. So the new deadline for the IDR adjustment is June the 30th. And a lot of people still wonder, what does that deadline mean? Who is it significant for? The June 30th deadline is truly potentially life-changing for people who have loans that are not included in this one-time adjustment for income-driven repayment. And this specific group of people are people who have commercially held federal student loans. These are the loans that if you log into studentaid.gov, you will see them there, but those loans are not held by the Department of Education. So when you go to look at the servicer's name, you won't see Department of Ed there. You'll see some other bank or company. So if you go into studentaid.gov and see that your loans are commercially held, you would need to consolidate those loans into the direct loan program, and the application is online at studentaid.gov. You would need to submit that application to consolidate by June 30th so that your loans would then be included in the IDR adjustment. The second group of people that that deadline could help are people who took loans with gaps in between when they borrowed. So think of someone who might have started college 15 years ago, but took some time off, maybe 2 years in, and then 5 years later came back, started taking classes again, and took out loans. When you have loans that are taken years apart, those loans are operating on different repayment timelines. And for every timeline that you have, that's a different set of progress toward the cancellation milestones. If you were to consolidate those loans by completing that application at studentaid.gov by June 30th, then your newer loans would be sped up to the repayment timeline of your older loans. Essentially, your entire consolidation loan would be treated as if it had all been on one repayment timeline, and that timeline would match whichever loan in your portfolio had the greatest amount of history. So that's why that June 30th deadline is so important. So two specific audiences that need to pay attention to that June 30th deadline. One would be people who have commercially held loans, and you can verify whether your loans are commercially held by going to studentaid.gov. The other group would be people who have loans that were taken several years apart and who might want to consolidate those loans to get them all on a faster timeline toward being forgiven by way of IDR. Everything you need to do to get on track for the IDR adjustment is online at studentaid.gov. And the next natural question people ask is, what is the IDR adjustment for? What does it look like? Well, what it's for is to make sure that the program is working as it was supposed to when the rules were written. All of the income-driven repayment plans have a cancellation provision that's baked into their rules. And those cancellation provisions basically say that no one should be repaying a student loan that's on an IDR plan for more than 20 years if that was an undergraduate loan, or 25 years if it was a graduate school loan, or a combination of undergrad and grad. So with all of these plans, there is a cancellation provision, and it's supposed to kick in after a person meets those milestones. Unfortunately, that had not been happening. There were millions of people who had had their loans in repayment for at least 20 years. And I believe the number of people who actually got their loans forgiven by way of this program was 32 out of about 4.4 million. And that was before this one-time adjustment was implemented by the Biden administration. So the June 30th deadline is for people to get their ineligible loans on track to be included in what's called a payment count. The payment count would let you know where you stand relative to that 20 or 25-year cancellation milestone, because right now, many of us don't know. And we don't know because the servicers had not been keeping a good record of those payments, nor informing people about their progress toward those cancellation milestones. So in September of this year, it was supposed to be July, but they pushed it back to September. In September of this year, people who have direct loans and federally held federal student loans will receive a payment count on each of those loans to let them know where those loans stand relative to that 20 or 25-year cancellation milestone. And the idea is that once you know where you stand relative to cancellation, you can make sure that you implement the correct strategy to get the remaining balance of that debt canceled when you do officially meet the milestone. And to make sure that you're on track, you would just need to be enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan, because after all, the IDR adjustment is to help people who are enrolled in income-driven repayment get closer to that cancellation milestone and be able to put a date on the calendar for when that debt is finally going to come to an end. As far as the rest of our updates are concerned, just a few events. I had the chance to visit Wilmington, Delaware last week and participate in the annual conference of the Eastern Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, known as EASFA. Had a great time there. Gave two presentations on PSLF, and I have to give a quick shout out to the University of Maryland Eastern Shore for their partnership to assist their employees with PSLF. We've been able to help their employees save more than $500,000 so far, and there's more to come. Helped another set of people confirm another about $250,000 worth of forgiveness. So we're closing in on 1 million, and I'm really excited about that project. And it was great to be able to tell my colleagues within EASFA about it. Also had the chance to visit the University of Maryland, Baltimore and their School of Pharmacy earlier this week. to talk to some of their residents about personal finances, including what's going on in student loans. And also early in the month, had the chance to visit College Park and Howard Community College just a bit before that. So Team McPhew has definitely been out here in the streets getting things done and just making sure that we're working on fulfilling that vision for students at all phases of that higher ed continuum to be credit-worthy, ready, resilient, empowered, successful, and thriving. So let's get to our first question of the day for office hours. That question is, should I cancel my consolidation application? We get this question a lot, and I think a lot of it has to do with the messaging that people receive after they have submitted the application to consolidate. Usually after you apply to consolidate online, within the next 2 weeks, you get a letter from Advantage, and that letter explains that your consolidation application has been received and you have 10 business days to notify them if you want to change your mind. Now, with everyone that we've helped consolidate, we knew consolidation was the way to unlock benefits for them. So there was no doubt that consolidation was something good that they would want to stick with. But for some reason, when that letter comes, it just tends to create some uncertainty within people. And so we get a lot of queries from people who receive that letter and are then wondering if they should cancel their consolidation application. So let's dig in with a bit more background. So this person was definitely trying to meet that previous deadline of April 30th, which again has now been extended until June 30th. So they completed the application to consolidate their undergraduate and graduate school loans before the deadline. Their loans were with Mohela, and they were in month 5 of their journey toward public service loan forgiveness. And remember, to get public service loan forgiveness, you need to have 120 months, qualifying months, where you've met the requirements of the program. After they applied to consolidate, they received a letter stating that the repayment terms for that consolidation loan range from 300 to 360 months instead of the 120 months for PSLF. And their last communication said that loans will consolidate and transfer over to Advantage. So I want to be very clear here. You do not need to cancel your consolidation application. Advantage sends out a form letter with that 10-day period where you can contact them to cancel the application. That's not, that letter is not specifically tailored toward you. It's just a form letter that everybody gets that gives them a second chance at making the decision again. So you could decide to cancel, you would just contact them and let them know, and the application would not move forward. If the servicer that was selected within the consolidation application was Mohela, then eventually Mohela will be the loan servicer. What happens with consolidation is Advantage handles the consolidation process for all federal student loans that are being consolidated through studentaid.gov. So the first party that you hear from after you submit the application is Advantage, because they're involved in that original, the origination, that first part of the loan consolidation process. After Advantage has completed that part, then your loan goes to the servicer that you selected within that consolidation application. Furthermore, with consolidation loans above a certain amount, it's automatic that their standard repayment plan shows as either, usually it's 30 years, but with an income-driven repayment plan, no one should be in repayment for more than 25 years. So when you see that repayment term of 300 to 360 months, please do not be alarmed. It just means that they're giving you all of the options, and the standard repayment plan is a fixed option that for consolidation loans, it defaults to 30 years and now 25. With PSLF, the requirement is still 120 months of qualifying payments. So don't be alarmed by the 360. That would just be an option for you if you chose to pay the loan off with a fixed plan instead of an income-driven plan and not through PSLF. So ignore that. Just make sure that you stay on track with your income-driven repayment plan and submitting your PSLF application so that you get credit for your employment. So the recommendation here is just make sure that you submit your PSLF form annually so that you can remain on track for loan forgiveness through PSLF. You're 5 months in. I congratulate you on taking the first steps and filling out your paperwork. and consolidating hopefully will help clarify things even more. Do not cancel that application for consolidation and move forward by continuing to track your employment through the PSLF application online at studentaid.gov/PSLF. All right, let's move to our next question. That question is, who do I make my payment to for this month, Mohela or Student Aid? So Mohela is a loan servicer. Federal Student Aid is an office within the Department of Education. So Federal Student Aid, think of them as a representative of your lender, which is the Department of Education. Mohela has been designated by the Department of Education to perform servicing duties on the loan. So your servicer is the point of contact for all of your billing concerns, and your servicer is also where you would send your payments to. So definitely Mohela. Right now, Mohela is going through a servicing platform transition. So some people have logged on and are like, what is this? Things look different. That's a transition that's happening within Mohela right now. So if Mohela was your servicer before, you should have received information. I got an email that explained that there was a transition to a new servicing platform happening. If you want to make sure that you're sending your payments to the proper place, I would start with mohela.com. But if you have to or feel more comfortable sending your payments in physically, then you can do so at the address that's listed on the screen, and just make sure that within that payment, you're including your account number so that they can process your payment properly. If your loans have not been transferred, I would strongly advise you to just wait for payment instructions from Mohela, or go back to your emails to make sure you haven't missed anything so that you don't send your payment to the wrong place. So the best thing to do would be to go to mohela.com. You can view information about the transition at the address that's listed there. All right, that brings us to our next question, which is, can I get the months of payment back from a year with the federal government when I was directly out of school? And if so, how can I go about doing this? So this is one of those questions where we had someone who went to school for a bit, took some time off, and then went back to school. And as a result, they have loans that entered repayment at different times. And each loan is operating on its own separate clock toward forgiveness. Let's take a look at what they can do to get back that time. A little bit of background first. A person worked for the federal government for 1 year directly out of graduate school. The loans were in a grace period or forbearance. They never submitted a PSLF application, and they never made any payments. They're returning to the federal government and pursuing PSLF. So glad to see that they're going to get back on track for PSLF. Now, keep in mind, the year that they were out of school here was during that pandemic payment pause. 2022 and 2023, that was a time when no one who had federally held student loans was required to make a payment. And typically, time to spend in forbearance does not count toward PSLF. However, that pause that came about because of the pandemic, that's an exception. So time spent during that CARES Act or COVID-19 forbearance does count towards PSLF. So we want to make sure that this person goes back to capture that previous employment. They should keep in mind, though, that grace periods do not qualify for PSLF. So if the loans were in a grace period, that's time that's not going to get you credit toward the 120 qualifying months you need for PSLF. But once the loans were out of the grace period and entered into that CARES Act forbearance that did not end until last fall, that time would count toward PSLF as long as the person had qualifying employment all throughout. Quick note here. I think I might have added some additional details that apply to another person here. I was thinking that this was a situation where the person had 2 sets of loans and consolidation was going to be there, but that's a future question that I'm going to answer. This particular person just had a period for which they had worked for a qualifying employer and had not submitted the application to document that employment, which is a great question, because some people think, well, if I'm no longer with an employer, it's too late for me to file a PSLF application for them. And that's not true. You can complete a PSLF application after you've left an organization. Sometimes it's just harder, though, because you have to go back from the outside and try to find a person on the inside who's responsible for verifying those applications or who's willing to do it for you. So our advice to this borrower is make sure you complete the PSLF application as soon as you return to employment with the federal government, and make sure that when you're inside of that help tool at studentaid.gov/PSLF, you include both the current employer and the previous employer so that you get the most credit toward PSLF and recognition of your employment within public service. All right, so let's move on to our next question. That question is about graduation. I'm graduating in a month and planning to apply for PSLF. I honestly don't know where to start. What are some things I should do to get off to a good start? Well, first of all, congratulations on your graduation. That's a really big deal. And I'm so glad that you asked this question, because with PSLF, things did not roll out so smoothly. So we have a lot of people who are backtracking and trying to fill out PSLF applications for former employers. And that can be difficult at times. So because you are graduating and you're at the very start of this PSLF journey, hopefully we can give you some steps to help you get on track and have just a smooth transition into that PSLF journey and get it over with as quickly as possible. All right, so the first thing you want to do is confirm you have direct loans. If you just graduated, then I'm pretty sure you have direct loans, but we just want to make sure that you confirm that, because direct loans are the only types of loans that are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. You can confirm your loan types by going to studentaid.gov, logging in, and once you're on that dashboard, you can take a look at all of your loans, and you just want to make sure that each loan name has the word direct in it. So after you confirm that you have direct loans, the next thing you want to do is confirm that your current employer or your potential employer is one that qualifies for PSLF. And you can do that online at studentaid.gov/PSLF. The third thing you'll want to do is make sure that you're enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. We have not stressed this as much during the past 2 years, just because we've been in this period called the IDR Adjustment. And during that period, people could earn credit toward IDR and PSLF, even if they were not enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. But after June 30th, that requirement is going to change. You will need to be enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan so that you can keep on earning credit toward cancellation by way of public service loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment. So after July 1, you want to make sure you're enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan to keep on earning credit. And the fourth and final step is to actually complete the application for PSLF. It's online at studentaid.gov/PSLF. There is a paper version. It's a little harder to find, and I'm kind of glad about that, because the online version is so much easier, and it also cuts back on the opportunity to make mistakes that could cause your application to be rejected. So congratulations again on your graduation, and please make sure that you get on track for PSLF ASAP once you start working for your first qualifying employer. All right, let's move on to our next question, and it is, can I add 3 loans because they are now in a grace period? And will they count under the IDR waiver to get the highest payment count? All right, so this is actually the question, the background of this question. I was kind of confusing with one of the questions earlier. So here's where we are talking about a person who had those undergraduate and graduate experiences with a gap in between. So a bit of a timeline for this borrower. On April 29th, they applied to consolidate their loans so that they could get the highest payment counts on both their undergraduate and their graduate school loans. So they were really making sure that they got their application in before the April 30th deadline, not knowing that 2 weeks later that deadline would be extended to June 30th. Then on May the 6th, they received a letter from AidVantage that said all of their loans could be consolidated except for the 3 that were still in an in-school status. When a loan is in the in-school status, it cannot be consolidated. That in-school status is something that you cannot work around. On May the 8th, this person graduated, and Mohela is now showing that the loans are in a grace period. So When the loans are in school, we know they cannot be consolidated. But when the loan enters the grace period, you can consolidate loans. And within the consolidation application, there is a question that will ask you, do you want to delay the processing of this consolidation application? The only reason why someone might delay the processing of a consolidation application is because they still want to enjoy the grace period, which is that 6-month period where no payments are due. However, if you're trying to get these loans included in the IDR adjustment, you don't want to delay the application because the deadline to benefit most greatly from the IDR adjustment is June the 30th. So with the previous deadline of April 30th, the IDR adjustment would not have helped this borrower because their graduate school loans would be still placed on a separate repayment clock because they did not enter the grace period until after the April 30th deadline. But now that the deadline has been extended until June 30th, this person still has the opportunity to bring in those 3 newer loans, consolidate them so that those 3 new loans get credit for the same amount of time attached to the oldest loan in their portfolio. So that deadline being extended is definitely going to help people who are graduating this spring of 2024, who can now consolidate their graduate school loans with their much older undergraduate loans and get all of those loans on the same timeline toward forgiveness. So to answer this person's question specifically, yes, you can add those 3 newer loans to the consolidation application, your existing consolidation application. Once you complete an application to consolidate, there's a 180-day window where you can add loans to that consolidation. So because this person just completed the application on April 29th, today is May 22nd, that means we are well within that 180-day range. So they could definitely take those 3 graduate school loans, add them into the existing consolidation loans so that all of the loans can get onto the same clock for forgiveness. Now, under the IDR adjustment, the consolidation loan will take on the repayment history of the one loan in that portfolio that has the longest amount of repayment history. So we know that this person had undergraduate school loans, they have graduate school loans. Those grad school loans are fresh because they just went into the grace period a couple of weeks ago. So they have no repayment history attached to them whatsoever. But if this person contacts the servicer and adds those 3 graduate school loans into the existing consolidation loan, the pace of those 3 graduate school loans toward forgiveness is going to be sped up just because they consolidated. And they'd want to make sure that they do this as soon as possible, though. Just a quick note on consolidation. When a loan is in school or in an in-school status, you cannot consolidate them. On the grace period, during the grace period, you can consolidate loans and opt out of the grace period to make things happen more quickly, which is helpful for people who are looking to meet that new IDR adjustment deadline of June the 30th. Also, when it comes to income-driven repayment and public service loan forgiveness, traditionally, in-school status, time spent in an in-school deferment, and time spent in grace periods would not count toward either IDR or PSLF because the loans were not in repayment. But again, they can take these grad school loans, wrap them into the existing consolidation, get them all on track for forgiveness at the same time. So the clear recommendation here is contact your loan servicer for details on how to add the remaining loans and enter repayment. There's also a paper form out there where you can add loans, and the information is provided here, but I encourage you, call the servicer and hopefully you can get through that process without having to complete a paper application because I think it would be much more efficient. All right, let's move on to our next question. That question is, why are they, and they is federal student aid, saying I have 0 qualifying payments, but Mohela says I have 172? How should I attack this? This is funny. So the word attack just made me giggle a little bit because this is definitely a huge problem, or it looks like a huge problem, because 172 would mean that you have definitely exceeded the requirements for public service loan forgiveness. 0 means that you have made no progress toward public service loan forgiveness. So let's take a look at the background on this question before we get to the answer. All right. So this particular borrower has student loans that go back as far as 1998. The loans have been consolidated recently. The borrower has been with their employer for 14 years, and they certified their employment about 2 months ago. So they're applying for PSLF. They definitely have the work history. Their loans have been around for more than 10 years. So this could be one of those cases where the first application for PSLF is the one that gets them through. However, when you consolidate your loans, there's a hiccup. I guess that's a good word for it. There's a hiccup within the payment count process. When you consolidate those older loans, they are paid off and a new loan is originated. Because that new loan has no history, when the first payment count is conducted, it's looking at the history of that new consolidation loan. The consolidation loan is new, so it has no history. So the payment count is zero. The good thing is, after this initial zero count, usually within 4 to 6 weeks, another payment count is performed. And in that payment count, they're going to pick up all of the history of the individual loans that went into that consolidation loan. So think about that zero qualifying payment count as temporary, and it happens to everyone. It doesn't mean that you have no history at all. It means that this particular consolidation loan has no history. Then they come back after they've done a review of all of the individual loans that were consolidated, and whichever one loan within that portfolio has the highest amount of repayment history, that history gets attached to every loan within the consolidation. That's why that June 30th deadline is so important. So this person, it sounds like they had loans that were not eligible for PSLF. They probably had FFELP loans. FFELP loans have to be consolidated to get on track for PSLF. And after the consolidation, that first payment count is always going to be zero or something in the single digits. Once you get the updated payment count, that will let you know whether you've met the requirements of PSLF. And for this borrower with a count of 172, if that's your qualifying payment count, then you have definitely exceeded the requirements. It's just that right now we are in this period where there's a processing pause on PSLF applications. So if you submit an application during the months of May and June, it will not be reviewed. But if that application is in the system, once the payment pause is over, then the application will, not the payment pause, the processing pause is over, then you will see your payment count updated. So for this particular borrower, I think that it's just a matter of time. You will end up getting that count restored, but just keep in mind that you're part of the processing pause right now. So make sure that you are just being patient, not worrying, and making sure that your application was correct when it was submitted, because it sounds like your case should be a pretty quick one to be resolved once this processing pause is over. All right, let's move on to the next question, which I think is our last question. As a teacher, do payments in the summer still count even though we are not working during that time? A great question, and this comes from a lot of teachers because the rules of PSLF state that you have to be working for a qualifying employer at the time that payments were made. And if you're a teacher, you work for a qualifying employer for about 8, maybe 8.5 months, but the summer you're not actually working. The good thing is you are still considered an employee, and that's what matters the most with PSLF. So payments will be payments that are made during the summer will count if you have an 8-month employment contract, if you work, if you are contractually obligated to work an average of 30 hours per week, and if you are considered a full-time employee by your employer, even during the break. So teachers, please make sure that when you're filling out your PSLF applications, don't break it up one academic year at a time. You don't want to submit one application for, September of 23 through May of 2024. You just want to look at your hire date for whatever district you're with and allow that employment to be continuous, because the time spent during your summer breaks will count even though you were not physically in the building or working. All right, so that is our last question. Before we wrap things up, I just want to share with you some resources for people who have student loans in the state of Maryland. Maryland is a state that actually has a student loan ombudsman housed within the state's Department of Labor. And if you're having problems with your loan servicer and you've reached out to them directly and you have not been able to achieve a resolution, then I would encourage you to go ahead and reach out to the student loan ombudsman. There are a lot of problems that they can assist with. And here's a list of them. Failure by the servicer to communicate with the borrower, errors in crediting principal and interest payments, misapplied payments, inaccurate interest rate calculations, billing errors, loan consolidation or modification errors, or inappropriate collection activities or tactics. So that's a long list of issues that the Student Loan Ombudsman's office can help you work through. But the first thing you need to do is reach out to your loan servicer and attempt to solve that problem directly with them and in good faith. And if that does not work out, then you can tap these external resources like the Student Loan Ombudsman, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is a federal agency, or the Ombudsman within the Office of Federal Student Aid. So do your best to solve it directly with the servicer, and if that doesn't work, please do reach out for reinforcements. All right, we don't have any additional questions that were sent in advance. I'm taking a look at the comments quickly. To Dr. Bearded Healer on Instagram, thank you so much for joining, and thank you for the shout out. We are really just wanted to make sure that student loan borrowers have accurate, up-to-date information, and so Office Hours is a platform that helps us do that, and we really appreciate your engagement. If you come up with any specific questions, please do reach out, tag me at Tisa Silver or at the MCCFW if you have specific questions, and we will be happy to help. Also, Chanel 0122, my friend Raina, thanks for joining. And I'm totally going to mess up how this is pronounced, but I am MEGHRS. I'm Meg Hars. If I messed that up, I apologize, but I appreciate you tuning into Office Hours today. All right, so I'm going to check one more time to see if we have any comments on Instagram, and I'm going to check Facebook really quickly. I don't see any comments that have come up here, but I did have one additional question that came in after these slides were put together. And that question has to do with the snowball method. So we had a person reaching out that has both federal student loans and private student loans. And they wanted to confirm whether they should use the snowball method to pay down the debt, or the debt snowball method. For those of you that aren't familiar with that, my understanding of it is that you take a look at the inventory of your debt and you attack the very smallest debt first. And for some people, it helps you, it's encouraging as you can completely knock a smaller debt off of your personal balance sheet, and then you proceed to the next biggest one, the next one, until you tackle the one that's the largest. So in this situation, the person had federal loans and private loans, and the federal student loans were the smaller debts. So they wanted to know, is it best for me to pay off these federal student loans and leave these private student loans outstanding, because the private loan balance was so much higher than the federal student loan balance? And in this situation, I told them, stop it. Just don't do the snowball method. As a matter of personal preference, yes, you can feel a sense of accomplishment after you paid off a small debt. But when you really take a look at the dollars and cents of it, how much you're saving, you would actually be losing money if you pay down the federal debt first and leave that private debt outstanding, for a couple of reasons. One is that private student loans typically have interest rates that are much, much higher than the rates that you'll see on federal student loans. Two, private loans do not have the same benefits, such as flexible repayment plans or public service loan forgiveness. And this particular borrower is a public servant currently working while going to school. So the advice that we gave is definitely revisit that snowball method when it comes to student loan debt, because if the loans are private loans, they're going to cost you more money in the long run than that federal student loan ever would. So general answer about how to attack debt. When you want to pay off debt, you want to make sure that you're recognizing the unique characteristics of every kind of debt. Student loans are a different kind of debt because there are benefit programs attached. There are forgiveness and cancellation programs that are there. They're also a debt that has no statute of limitations, okay? So there are lots of things that make student loan debt unique. So if you're thinking about paying off credit cards or a car note, things of that nature, that's great. But your approach would be different when student loans are involved. So just be mindful that student loans are a unique form of debt. And when it comes to picking whatever your strategy is going to be repaying them, you want to make sure that you're considering those unique characteristics. And for this particular borrower, definitely implemented a new strategy, which is to focus on paying down that private loan debt. And also, since they're still in school, borrowing no more private loans, taking loans from the federal government to make sure that we're not having that private balance grow even more by adding additional loans to that burden. All right, checking the comments one more time. I don't see anything. Let's see, we got one pop up. Oh, thank you to the Bowie State University Women's Forum. I got a note that says, thank you for the great work you do. This is so helpful to the community. Thank you so much for joining us. And also thank you to you, BSU Women's Forum, for the work that you do on the campus of Maryland's oldest HBCU. That's Bowie State University. And just thank you for everything that you do to encourage the women that are on campus and help them get together, get professional development and fellowship opportunities. That's really a big deal, and I appreciate you being there. All right, I don't see any other comments. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this, which is the May 22nd edition of Office Hours presented by the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. My name is Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy. I'm the founder and executive director of the center, and Office Hours is hosted twice per month. If you have any questions about student loans, feel free to reach out. We have a contact form at mccfw.org/contact. Or you can tag us on social media. We are at the MCCFW across all platforms. In just a bit, this video will be annotated and uploaded to YouTube so that you can get straight to the content that matters most to you. In the meantime, I hope that wherever you are, it's as beautiful outside of your window as it is outside of mine. I'm planning to go get some sunshine, and I hope that you do too. Until next time, thank you again for joining us, and be well. Bye-bye.